They served Hitler and helped orchestrate some of the Third Reich's most infamous campaigns. But less than a decade after Nazi Germany collapsed in flame, these same men were back, this time not to conquer Europe, but to defend it. This is the story of how Hitler's generals became architects of West Germany's democratic military and NATO's new front line. In July 1944, General Heinz Speidel made a fateful decision that placed him at the center of one of the most significant resistance efforts against Hitler. As a key participant in the July 20th plot to assassinate the Führer, Speidel risked everything in an attempt to end Nazi rule. His position as Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's chief of staff on the Western Front provided him with both the access and military understanding necessary for the conspiracy. While Rommel's own level of involvement remains debated by historians, Speidel worked behind the scenes, coordinating German defenses against the recent Allied invasion while simultaneously supporting plans to remove Hitler from power. The failed assassination attempt triggered a brutal wave of reprisals. The Gestapo arrested Speidel, placing him in a cell at their notorious headquarters in Berlin. Through careful denials and a limited paper trail connecting him to the plot, he managed to avoid conviction, while thousands connected to the resistance were executed. Speidel remained imprisoned until the end of the war. In post-war Germany, Speidel's record stood out. Unlike many of his peers, he had actively resisted Hitler. This made him politically acceptable when Chancellor Konrad Adenauer sought to rebuild a democratic German military. In 1950, Adenauer appointed Speidel as his military advisor, a role that would shape the very foundation of the Bundeswehr. When the Bundeswehr was formally established in 1955, Speidel became one of its first generals. His first-hand experience from both world wars gave him strategic insight the West desperately needed. 2 years later, he was appointed commander of Allied land forces Central Europe, putting him in charge of troops from multiple NATO countries, including American forces. From Gestapo prisoner to NATO commander, Speidel's journey symbolized West Germany's transformation. He was no longer just a German general, he was now a Cold War strategist in service of a new alliance. But not every general's redemption came through resistance. Some were much closer to Hitler and still found their way back to power. On the afternoon of July 20th, 1944, Lieutenant General Adolf Heusinger stood just a few feet from Adolf Hitler inside the Wolf's Lair headquarters. He was in the middle of a briefing outlining the latest developments on the Eastern Front when a briefcase bomb, planted by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, exploded under the conference table. Heusinger was thrown to the ground, wounded in the blast that killed 4 others. Hitler survived. So did Heusinger. At the time, Heusinger was Chief of Operations of the German Army High Command, OKH, a role that placed him at the very center of Nazi Germany's war machine. From the invasion of France to Operation Barbarossa, he had helped plan and coordinate some of the largest military campaigns in modern history. After the failed assassination attempt, the Gestapo launched a wave of arrests. Heusinger, though injured, was quickly detained and interrogated. Despite his senior position, investigators failed to find enough evidence linking him to the resistance. He avoided the fate of other officers, surviving, once again, by a thin margin. That grey zone, neither conspirator nor war criminal, would shape Heusinger's post-war path. When West Germany began rebuilding its military, his deep operational experience made him invaluable to the new defense establishment. In 1957, Heusinger was appointed the first Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, effectively becoming West Germany's highest-ranking military officer. Though the Soviet Union protested loudly, accusing him of war crimes committed on the Eastern Front, those claims found little traction in the West. For NATO leaders, Heusinger represented institutional memory, strategic skill, and Cold War reliability. By 1961, he had risen even further, named chairman of the NATO Military Committee, the first German to ever hold the role. The symbolism was striking. The man who once orchestrated campaigns for the Nazi regime now oversaw the defense of Western Europe, working alongside the very nations Germany had once fought. For some, Heusinger's appointment was pragmatic. For others, it was disturbing. But it reflected the political truth of the era. In the nuclear age, experience was currency and redemption was negotiable. On September 5, 1944, General Friedrich Foertsch was awarded the Knight's Cross for his role in one of the most devastating battles of World War II. As Chief of the General Staff of the German 18th Army, he oversaw operations on the Leningrad front, a theater defined by brutality, attrition, and staggering civilian suffering. The siege of Leningrad had lasted nearly 900 days, claiming over 1 million lives through starvation, disease, and constant bombardment. Foertsch's role in coordinating German defensive efforts during the Soviet counteroffensives placed him at the heart of a crumbling Eastern Front. In early 1944, as the Soviet forces broke the German encirclement, Foertsch and his units were pushed westward. They eventually became trapped in the Courland Pocket, a coastal region in Latvia where more than 200,000 German troops were surrounded and cut off. It was there that Foertsch was captured by the Red Army ending his wartime service. 5 years later, he sat in a Soviet prison cell, convicted of war crimes and sentenced to 25 years. The charges centered on his role in the systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure and cultural sites during the Wehrmacht's retreat from Soviet territory. Unlike some of his contemporaries who faced execution or disappeared into labor camps, Foertsch's sentence was surprisingly short. In 1955, after serving just 5 years, he was quietly released. The timing was no coincidence. That same year, West Germany rearmed, forming the Bundeswehr as part of NATO's strategy to counter the Soviet bloc. With Cold War tensions rising, the need for experienced commanders outweighed past moral judgments. Foertsch, who had commanded troops on both Eastern and Western fronts and understood Soviet tactics intimately, was too valuable to ignore. In 1961, Friedrich Foertsch was appointed Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, succeeding Adolf Heusinger as West Germany's highest-ranking military officer. The promotion ignited immediate controversy. Domestically and abroad, critics questioned how a man once convicted of war crimes by an Allied tribunal could now lead the armed forces of a democratic nation. But in Cold War West Germany, political discomfort often yielded to military necessity, and Foertsch's experience on both Eastern and Western fronts remained highly valued. His tenure began under intense pressure. That same year, the Berlin Wall rose overnight, transforming Cold War anxiety into a daily frontline standoff. But just a year later, that image would unravel in one of West Germany's most explosive political crises, the Spiegel affair. Der Spiegel published a detailed article titled "Conditionally Prepared for Defense," based on leaked information from NATO's Phalanx 62 wargame exercise. The article revealed that West Germany's military was not capable of repelling a Soviet attack, despite official assurances. The piece exposed alarming deficiencies in Bundeswehr readiness, including poor logistics, inadequate communication systems, and strategic disorganization. The fallout was immediate. Defense Minister Franz Josef Strauss was forced to resign, but Foertsch remained. He retired as a 4-star general on December 31, 1963. In the final months of the war, Heinz Trettner served as Chief of Staff to Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, helping coordinate Germany's last-ditch defense in northern Italy. The collapse was inevitable as Allied forces were advancing from the south and Nazi Germany was already on its last legs, but Trettner's war and his military career was far from over. Trettner had been part of the Luftwaffe since its early years. Unlike many of his peers, he was a specialist in airborne warfare, not ideology. His career took off during the Spanish Civil War, where he gained combat experience as part of the German Condor Legion. He later commanded paratrooper units during the invasions of Poland and France, leading some of Nazi Germany's earliest paratrooper operations. His most notable moment came in 1941 during Operation Mercury, the airborne invasion of Crete. It was the first major combat operation in history carried out entirely by paratroopers. The mission was tactically successful but came at a high cost, with thousands of German casualties. Trettner's leadership during the campaign cemented his reputation as one of Germany's most innovative airborne commanders. After Germany's surrender, Trettner was interned by Allied forces and released without charge. In 1956, Trettner joined the newly formed Bundeswehr, bringing with him decades of operational experience in aviation and air defense. In 1964, he was appointed Inspector General of the Bundeswehr, the highest military office in West Germany. But Trettner's appointment didn't go unnoticed by Cold War adversaries. The East German government condemned the decision, with senior communist officials accusing Trettner of participating in the infamous bombing of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War. The following year, Ignacio Hidalgo de Cisneros, a former commander of the Spanish Republican Air Force, publicly criticized Trettner's appointment, framing it as a dangerous rehabilitation of fascist-era figures. But it wasn't only foreign critics who posed challenges. Inside West Germany's defense establishment, Trettner clashed with Karl Gumbel, the civilian deputy minister of defense. Their strained relationship worsened when Gumbel issued directives during the minister's absence, orders Trettner believed overstepped military protocol. The final breaking point came when the defense ministry, despite a court ruling, declared that military personnel could join unions. Trettner viewed this as a direct threat to military discipline and operational cohesion. In 1966, after just 2 years in the role, Trettner resigned. The winter of 1942 tested Hans Röttiger's military leadership, as he commanded panzer forces during Germany's failed Stalingrad offensive. Röttiger witnessed firsthand the limitations of German armor in extreme conditions, lessons that would later influence his approach to designing Germany's post-war military doctrine. On January 30, 1945, Röttiger was promoted to the rank of General of the Panzer Troops. As the war drew to a close, he was selected, alongside his superior, Colonel General Heinrich von Vietinghoff, to help coordinate the German surrender in Italy. But tensions among the German high command were rising. On April 29th, Vietinghoff was arrested, and the very next day, Röttiger was detained as well. just as he met with the incoming commander, General of the Infantry Friedrich Schulz. Schulz promptly declared himself the new commander of Army Group C, sidelining both men. After the official capitulation on May 2, 1945, Röttiger was taken into Western Allied captivity. He remained a prisoner of war until his release in 1948. As a General de Panzertruppe, Röttiger had helped refine the blitzkrieg tactics that brought Germany swift victories in the war's early years. His expertise in coordinating tank formations with infantry and air support had contributed to the Wehrmacht's initial success. This specialized knowledge of armored warfare would prove invaluable in his later career, when the focus shifted to defending against rather than executing such tactics. After Germany's surrender, Röttiger's expertise became particularly relevant as Western powers assessed the Soviet Union's massive armor advantage across Central Europe. NATO planners valued officers who understood Soviet capabilities firsthand. In October 1950, Röttiger brought these hard-won insights to the secretive Himmerod Conference, where former Wehrmacht officers drafted recommendations for West Germany's rearmament. Their proposals established the blueprint for the Bundeswehr, creating a military subordinate to civilian authority within a European defense framework. When the Bundeswehr formed in 1955, Röttiger became the first inspector of the army, responsible for building a force that met NATO requirements while distancing itself from Wehrmacht traditions. Under his leadership, the Bundeswehr adopted a defensive posture, focused on territorial protection rather than offensive capabilities. Though Röttiger's influence was cut short by his death from cancer in 1960, his legacy endured through the Bundeswehr's organizational structure, defensive orientation, and NATO integration. As Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Europe in 1944, Vice Admiral Friedrich Ruge worked alongside Field Marshal Erwin Rommel to strengthen German coastal defenses along the Atlantic Wall. Ruge's recommendations influenced the placement of obstacles, mines, and underwater barriers designed to impede the landing forces. His expertise in defensive naval warfare had been developed over decades of service, though it ultimately proved insufficient against the massive Allied operation that landed in Normandy. Ruge established himself as a specialist in mine warfare and coastal defense, earning the Knight's Cross for these contributions. His technical understanding of naval barriers and minefields represented expertise that would remain valuable throughout his career. At the end of the war, Ruge was taken prisoner. After his release, in 1946, he began rebuilding his life working as a translator, writer, and educator. When German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer began exploring rearmament in the early 1950s, Ruge's blend of combat experience and intellectual credibility made him an ideal consultant. He helped define the conceptual framework for the new German Navy. With the Bundeswehr's formal establishment in 1955, Ruge became the first inspector of the Navy, essentially serving as West Germany's chief of naval operations. Under his leadership, the German Navy evolved from a coastal protection force into a significant NATO contributor focused on Baltic Sea control. This transformation reflected the era's changing maritime priorities. While Hitler's Kriegsmarine emphasized surface raiders and battleships, the Cold War Bundesmarine, under Ruge's direction, prioritized anti-submarine warfare and protecting vital sea lanes against Soviet threats. Night after night, waves of Allied bombers unleashed devastation on German cities, forcing civilians to seek shelter as firestorms lit the skies. In response, General Josef Kammhuber deployed an innovative air defense system designed to counter the nightly raids. Known as the Kammhuber Line, the network stretched across occupied Europe, transforming the night sky into a tactical grid. Each sector was equipped with radar stations, searchlights, and anti-aircraft battery, all coordinated with night fighters to intercept incoming bombers with surgical precision. Kammhuber's experience in defensive air operations earned him the Knight's Cross and recognition as one of the Luftwaffe's foremost authorities on night fighting. His integration of radar technology with tactical aircraft operations represented specialized knowledge that few military leaders possessed. He systematically analyzed bombing patterns and developed countermeasures, establishing himself as Germany's primary defensive strategist against Allied air power. His mastery of radar systems, electronic warfare, and complex air defense coordination proved particularly valuable as the Cold War emerged. The threat of Soviet bombers potentially carrying nuclear weapons created an urgent need for air defense expertise in Western Europe, precisely the knowledge Kammhuber possessed. After his release from American captivity in 1948 without facing war crimes charges, Kammhuber spent several years studying emerging air warfare concepts and writing analyses of aerial defense operations. In 1956, Kammhuber became the first inspector of the German Air Force. Kammhuber guided the German Air Force in acquiring its first jet fighters and developing NATO-compatible operational procedures. He transformed the defeated Luftwaffe into a modern air force, contributing to Western Europe's collective defense. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed learning about today's topic, make sure to check out our other video about German generals. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more World War II content. And we'll see you in the next one.